Okay, so I've done the basic bit of modelling I need there for the stairs. Now I want to model something that's a little bit more detailed, and I want to put it into this space here that's behind the ceiling and the wall. So I'm going to show you a couple of viewing options as well that'll make it easier to work with interiors. And it's especially useful when you start to model more detailed elements in your interiors. So you can see there I've got my 3D views category open there, and you can see there I've got just the one view called 3D. So I'm going to right click on that view, go to duplicate, and then just duplicate again. Yeah, so I'm just right clicking on my view name, 3D, in brackets, in the project browser, and then going to duplicate view and then duplicate. So now I've got a copy of that view, you can see there, 3D copy 1, and I'm going to right click on that new view and go to rename. And I'm going to call this 3D section box. Section box. So this is something you'll find you'll do a lot with Revit. So make sure you know about that option. Any view in the project browser, you can right click and then go to duplicate view, and usually just use the first option there, duplicate.
So I just need to understand, because I'm so lost and obviously far behind that I can't retain all this information.
Yep.
This has been filmed and recorded on the thing,
Yes.
so I don't need to stress.
No, that's right. Yep, you can go back over it. Yep. Okay, so there I've got a new view, but at the moment it's identical to the previous one. Right, so double clicking on those, you shouldn't see any difference except that one might be zoomed a bit differently, but otherwise they're identical, unless you change it. So, don't know if you remember the section box tool in your view properties. You can find it usually just by scrolling down a little bit, and you'll see there's a group of a lot of tick boxes, and you should be able to find the section box tool there, or the section box option, which you can just tick. Okay, so once you've turned that on, you should see a box comes up around your model in 3D. Has to be a 3D view. This doesn't work in other views, in plans and sections. You won't get that option in the same way. Yep. So when you select that box, you'll see it's got arrows on all 6 sides. So a box always has, of course, 6 sides, and you may need to orbit to see clearly which side each of those arrows is on. So you can see as you orbit, the arrows move around, and you can tell visually that each of those arrows belongs to a certain side. So here I can see very clearly that this arrow down on the bottom left relates to that side of the box, and I can just click and drag on that arrow, bring it back, and it's going to cut into the building. So I just want to make sure I'm cutting away that wall that's blocking my view of the interior, and also I'm going to, with the arrow that's at the top there, just click and drag and bring it down slightly at the top so it'll hide the ceiling too. Okay, section box. So in your view properties, so over on the left there, yeah, just scroll down in your properties, yeah, and scroll down, you'll see section box is below the group of several tick boxes. It's probably the last one. Okay, so those objects that are hidden, of course, haven't been deleted. If I go back to the original 3D view, you can still see them. So this view, or this option in your views, essentially just gives you a way of cutting away things in 3D, which for interiors is really helpful. So, just so that it's easier for you to see the height that I'm modelling at, I'm going to go back into my ground floor floor plan, and then very quickly make a floor. So back on the Architecture tab, I'm going to click on the Floor tool, and this might help you as well. I'm not going to try and be too tricky here and pick the walls and trim them or anything like that. I'm just going to use the Rectangle tool and draw over the inside of my walls there. I'm fairly sure I'll break this floor up into some stepped levels later anyway. So this is just a rough floor to give me an idea of my levels anyway, of my heights. So I just wanted to show you that if I finish that now and then have a look in the 3D view, it's a little bit clearer than if I've got a base. But really what I want to show you again is how to use that modelling tool to create different things. So, like I said, I want to make a vanity type unit over here. And so, just like before, I'm going to go back to the arrow on the component and model in place. And don't be afraid to experiment with this tool. Sometimes it's good just to try and make something simple rather than the final thing you're trying to design, just to get a feel for the way all these options work. So again, once I've chosen model in place, then it's going to give me a list of categories. So last time it wasn't too difficult because we were making a stair and you had stairs there as an option in your categories. Now, I'm trying to make some built-in furniture. So, looking at the categories that I can see there, I might just try and show you the full list. So I want to be brave and guess which category there would work well for this sort of furniture. So you might see that there's a furniture category there and think that would be a good category for a piece of furniture like this. It's a built-in piece of furniture after all, but it's not, unfortunately. The furniture category is mainly for furniture that's not built in. So chairs, tables, things that aren't fixed, and definitely things that aren't built in. That's what you should use furniture for. There's another one called for built-in furniture. It's called casework. And it's just the American term for built-in furniture, essentially. So use casework if it's built in, and most of the furniture you design will be built in. Things that aren't built in, you'll get from a furniture maker. So, but the things that are built in, you'll design from scratch. So I'm going to use casework, and that's a good all-round category to use for most of your built-in furniture. Click OK. Then it'll ask you for a name. This is where you've got a lot more freedom. It's up to you. You're the one who's going to see this. No one else will, most likely. So call it something that's meaningful for you. Vanity unit. So I know what it is.
Should we just put in like built-in unit?
Yeah, whatever you like. Anything that's meaningful for you. Yeah. So I'm just going to click OK. And then what do you know? I've got the modelling tools that we've been looking at. And I'm going to go back and use Extrusion. And where possible, try to use Extrusion because you can make most things with that tool. This book I've got on Japanese homes, essentially, Japanese residential design, everything in here, and I've had a good look through this book again. I haven't read it for a few years, but I've been looking at it over the weekend just for you. And the only elements that you couldn't make are the Western style old things that are sometimes in here, but everything else that's done in the traditional Japanese way you could make with extrusions. They're all boxes of different shapes put together in interesting ways to make these really interesting spaces. So you don't need to always use these more complicated tools to make an interesting object. We'll look at these later, so blend, revolve, sweep being the main ones, and then swap blend is just a mix of those two. They definitely have their uses, but like I said, extrusion is the main one, and you'll probably be able to do 90% plus of your elements with that tool. And you could easily pass this assignment just using the extrusion tool. So you wouldn't need to use any of the others. And so again, I'm going to use that one, extrusion. Just going to click, and going to make my vanity unit piece by piece the way you would actually build it in real life. So, has anyone had a look at the bottom piece that you normally have with something like a vanity unit? What's the bit that normally sits on the ground? Exactly, the kicker or the kickboard, sometimes you call it. Yep, that's what it is, but that's it. So that's the thing I'm going to make first. And to make it, I'm going to draw an extrusion using a rectangle. I've already clicked on the extrusion tool, so I'm going to go to rectangle, draw the shape I want roughly in plan, then cancel, and come back and select the lines and see if I need to change those measurements. Yeah, just go back to the architecture tab, and then click on the arrow on the component, and then model in place again. Yeah, I'm just going to make it a random length, but then the width, or the depth, sorry, it should be a particular size. So I'm going to make it 600 all up. So that means if I make this 550, so I want to do it flush, so I have my detail, and I've just put it away.
Do you want us to be doing this?
No, you don't have to, no.
So you're just showing us this, so that then we can do it wherever we want in our phone.
Exactly,
yeah?
exactly, yeah. So,
where
yep.
do we find that file that we just made? So I've gone back into the component model, whatever.
Yeah,
And I've gone back into this thing, but where's that?
casework.
Yeah, but I went putting it file. I've already done that, but where do I
Yeah, you'd lost it. You must have cancelled it. So, yeah. So you just need to give it a name again. So, so again, if I want my bench to be 600, and then I'm going to have a setback of 50 mil from the bench to the kickboard. So that means this will be 550. And then this would really just be a piece of board, which I can offset later to make hollow. But for the time being, I'm just going to leave it solid. And so then, what's the height going to be for a kickboard normally? Exactly. It is 100. That's the standard height for most, conventional bathroom and kitchen units. But with Japanese units, cabinetry, it's a little bit more refined, I suppose, and they have smaller or lower. It's not even a kickboard, but lower bases. So I'm going to make it 70, just to make it something different. Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Properties. Oh, so if it's off, just type PP. Yeah, well, there's a shortcut there. Just type PP on the keyboard. Yeah. So, okay, so I've made the height 70. Tick to finish. And then, how do I check that it's sitting on the floor and not sitting on the ground? Exactly. Check the 3D view as you go. I can't see it in the one that I had at the beginning, but I've got the other one, the section box, 3D section box, where I should be able to see it. So there, it's clearly sitting on the floor that I've made, so I know it's at the right height, and I can then continue in the ground floor plan, back to extrusion, and I'll make the, I'll just do a rough outline, and we'll add in the detail later, I think. So I'm going to make another, also use the rectangle tool again. Just going to click and snap to points on top of what I've made already. But then I'm going to select this line afterwards, and I'll just bring that out to 600 for now. And then the height. So what height would you normally make your vanities?
900.
Yeah, that's if you want a high one. You could do it that high. That's quite high. That's the kitchen benches.
That'd be the basin height.
Yeah, you can try to do that height. Usually you make vanities a bit lower than typical benches. Yeah, so 800's okay. And you can even have, if you've got the basin sitting on top of your bench, you can go down to 600 easily. And that gives a slightly different feel as well. So I'm going to try 600 because I'm going to try. So that's the height of my top. But then what's going to happen now if I finish that? If it's starting at 0 and then finishing at 600? Is it going to sit on top of my kickboard? No, it's going to cover it, okay, because it's starting at 0. Exactly, so it's got to, that's right, starting at 70, it starts 70 above the level. So if I finish that now, let's have a look in 3D. And you can see it starts 70 mil above the ground, which of course means it's sitting right on top of the kickboard.
So if it's a suspended line,
Yep.
just change the start.
Yeah, exactly.
And
Leave,
it's going to be just a suspended.
that's right, exactly. Mount it to the walls, fine. Yep. So now I want to put the bench top on. So back to the Create tab, I'll make another extrusion. And so again with the rectangle tool, I'm just going to snap right over this. I'm not going to have the bench top with ellipse so that it comes out from the cabinet. I'm going to make it flush to start with. And then I maybe will just bring this forward slightly. So I'm going to select that line now and make this 620. Right, so these are just my measurements. You can make them anything you want. And so remembering our heights, the cabinet is 600 from the ground, the top of the cabinet. So I want to make this, this piece about 40 mil thick. So I'm going to make the top 640. And then the start, I'll make 600 for now. Tick to finish. Again, back into my 3D view. And we've got a bench top. So what would I do then if I wanted to put a cutout for a sink in there? So it's really obvious once you know, but when I first went to do this, I used to make voids, and I'll just show you those quickly. So back to ground floor. So in this case, actually, voids will work well, so I will show you those. But then I'll show you another way afterwards as well. So you've got the extrusion tool. If you go to the void forms option, you've got void extrusion there. And void extrusions work exactly the same as regular extrusions. So with void extrusion, I'm just going to say that for now my basin is circular. You can change it to a different shape later. So I'm going to click on the circle tool there and just draw a circle shape roughly where I think my basin might be, which is about there. And then, this is where it's interesting, and probably the last thing I'll show you for now, I'm going to change the start to about halfway in the middle, so 300. And then the end, I'm going to make 1,000. So the reason I've made it 1,000 is because the void doesn't need to finish at the same height as the bench. It can go higher, and it's still going to cut through the bench. So the void, if you're not sure what it's doing, it's going to cut through the things I've already made. So if I finish this now, back into my section box view, and you can see because it's still selected, it's a bit hard to see, but if I click to one side, you can see then it's cut a hole through both the bench top and the cabinet underneath. So I'll finish the model now, and I'll show you why that's necessary. So I'm going to go back into the ground floor, back to architecture, component, place component, load family, and just so you can all do this, I'll get it from the default library, so I'm just going to go to plumbing fixtures, or plumbing, architectural fixtures, and sinks. So then we've got a sink vanity round. I'll just double click to bring that in. I'm going to click roughly to place that in position. That's about right.
So you have to make the void before you can place it.
Oh, you can place them first and then make the void, but you'll need a void in the end. Yeah, in the end. If it's being recessed, because this is the way you build it. So if we look at it now, in plan you won't notice the problem, but in 3D you can see.
So just wait. You need to make
You need to make the cutout.
size.
Yeah, exactly. That's right, exactly. The way you build it. And these are the things when you're designing your units that you need to factor in as well. So if you're designing a bench top, which you'll be doing all the time, you need to give the joinery drawings to the cabinet makers with the cutouts worked out for your. They wouldn't cut them until they get on site, but you definitely would need to locate them on their drawings. So, and it gives you a good idea how these things are made. So you can see here I've made the cutout, and we can obviously see that it's not big enough, but also the sink itself isn't at the right height. Now, to change that, you can usually, not always, but usually you can change the height there in properties. So if you remember that I made my cabinet 600 and then I had 40 mil above that for the bench. It's a fairly low vanity, this one, but that's what I want. So I'm going to make the top of the counter there 640. Now the sink's at the right height, but my hole still needs to be adjusted. So to do that, I can select my my unit, edit in place, and now to change the void, you can see there when I go near the edge of that hole, you can see it's bringing up that cylinder, which is my void. I can select it, and then you can see you get the edit extrusion button. It's just like a normal extrusion. I can go back to my plan while I'm working on it, find the circle and move that, and then also oh no, we can't. Yeah, so I've got to click and drag on that side to get it to drag out. It doesn't need to be a precise measurement because really it just needs to be sitting under the lip there that you can see running around the outside. And that's how they build it. So the carpenters or the cabinet makers would find out how big the lip there is and make sure that the hole or the edge of it goes underneath it. So that's, you can just do that by eye. You shouldn't need any exact measurements. Tick to finish. Now, when I look in the 3D view, we can't see any edges of the bench or the cabinet inside the sink there, which is what you're trying to achieve. Tick to finish. So that will be enough for a placeholder type unit that will give you the overall size of your bench and the position, of course. And then what I might show you later, I was tempted to show you today, but we'll see how we go, because I just want to make sure you can all comfortably manage that tool and group your objects first before we go too far with the modelling. But I'd like to show you how you can make, if you can see here in this picture, the lattice pattern that I've got on the door there. And you'll see this with shoji screens and other things as well. Sometimes people think you have to use the other modelling tools to make these more detailed elements. But I'll show you later, you can easily make that with an extrusion. You might be thinking you've got to make it by extruding lots of things from the plan. But think about something like a shoji screen or that lattice pattern. And you might realise that you can make it more easily with an extrusion by drawing on the surface of the unit. So in other words, I can extrude from this door face and essentially extrude sideways instead of extruding up from the plan. And if you think about all of the things you could make, all of the building elements that you can make by either extruding from the plan or extruding in a different direction, you probably realise that, like I said, nearly everything in a building can be made just using extrusions. So I'll show you that later, but try and make a unit like this. If you want to make something that's more complex, say you want to make your own toilet even though there are lots that you can find in the library, say that you want to make one that you can't find in the library, just do what I've done there, make something simpler as a placeholder. So you can go and make, again with model in place, I'll say casework again, even though it's going to be a toilet, just the basic outline for the shape you want for your unit. So again, I'm going to do a basic toilet here. So just with a line and or a couple of lines and an arc, I can get a basic shape that is similar to WC. Just go and bring it out a little bit. Okay, so just a basic shape I've drawn in plan, and I'll make that start at 0 and finish at 600. So that when I'm working in 3D, I've got something that's the right shape and size that I can plan around. Okay, so even if you find that you need something that you can't make with extrusions, like a WC, just do something simple, and we're going to look at the other modelling tools later. So vanities, a lot of the other framing elements, screens, your baths. If you're planning on doing a moulded bath, then you probably want to get that from the library. But if you're going to try and do a Japanese style bath, they're normally rectangular, and you can just make them by extruding shapes from the plan. Roman baths, same idea. Roman baths are pretty similar to some of the Japanese baths, actually. So something to think about. I was just using the 3D view to look at it, but I did all the modelling in the plan view.
In the actual original one?
Yeah, in ground floor. Oh, not even in the original 3D, in ground floor, in my floor plan, because I can draw the shape more easily from above there. Yeah. Well, actually, okay, so it's the same idea. Once you, like I said, once you get used to using the tools like extrusion, say you want to do a cutout in your floor. Okay, I'm going to select it and show you how easy it is. Edit boundary is going to take me back to the sketch, so just like an extrusion. Now, you can put a void in, but there's an even easier way, and this works for extrusions too. If you just draw a shape inside, so I'm going to draw a rectangle here, maybe where I want my bath to go. That's it, that's a hole. Tick to finish. Let's have a look at it back in the 3D view. That easy. So that'll cut a hole in the floor, but then to do all the surrounds, you might need to make some extrusions to, you know, if you need to have a raised plinth or anything that goes around that, and you could have the parts inside with extrusions as well, just going down.
So you understand that the walls goes down to the floor?
Yep.
Even if there is no walls under?
Yeah, well, you need to make a new one. So you probably excavate the ground for the bath, and then make a base under that, which would be just like a floor. So yeah, so be creative, and you'll probably find that you can do a lot of the layout as well using things like extrusions. Before you even start modelling the detailed elements, you can even just use them to rough out zones. So you might say, well, I'm planning on having my bathroom, and if you are planning like me on doing Japanese style design, one thing that's really, really important for in a Japanese bathroom is to have the toilet separated from the rest of the bathroom. Very few Japanese people would be happy with a toilet that was open to the rest of the bathroom. That would be considered a really just not a good thing. And so, okay, it's pretty obvious the reason. So, okay, so you can do walls and those other things, but a really quick way of just roughing out that zone is, again, make an extrusion. So I'm going to call this WC room. Just make an extrusion. The size I want that to be. And back in my 3D view, I can see it. I didn't even think about the height, but I wouldn't normally worry about that because I can just stretch it there with the arrows to roughly.
Why wouldn't you just do walls?
Because that'll give you, you have to put in the thickness and outline the space.
It's just roughly.
Yeah, that's right. And often when you're doing design, in the initial stages, you'll just want to rough out the zones in block form and then work out the connections and make sure the right things, the right zones are connecting to the other zones that they need to connect to before you do all the detailed planning with the walls and doors and other things. And I'll show you later, you can easily make this transparent, and that makes it easy if you do want to put walls over the top. Or you can just delete it. So again, that can be a good way of roughing out the zones. I'm actually going to do exactly that as the next thing I'll show you afterwards. For now, I'll just finish that. And so, like I've been saying, we are going to go much further with the modelling tools, but then maybe just to get you thinking about the design process. For interiors, the geometry that you do is pretty important, but maybe you've been thinking about using Revit to give you something else that you'll need for all your drawings, especially for studio. So what have we been missing on the drawings? Apart from the geometry, we've been probably only doing bare minimum of that, but at least you've done a fair bit of drawing of different shapes and sizes for things. But then you might have been thinking about how to get materials that you need to show as well. So that's the other thing you've got to think about when you're making these custom elements. You can set the materials as you go. So we might do that next before we go into the detailed modelling. But I'll give you some time to work on that anyway, and then you can let me know if you've got any problems as well.